Off you get, Campbell. Go on. Whew, dearie me. Another warm one over here for 2016. Back from the break. You are watching the single malt review. If you missed that on the door, thank you very much for tuning in for the new year. And we're going to get straight into it with some really compelling whiskies from Springbank. First up is the 10-year-old. What have you got on it, Dave?
Yes, well, we're joined here by Campbell the cat. And it's quite appropriate as we're off to Campbellton for a 10-year-old Springbank, as Tim has said. Independently owned, one of the bigger Campbellton distilleries since Campbellton came back on to the whisky scene in relatively recent times.
Yes, independently owned. Does its own maltings. It's a very, very hands-on company, that one. Fascinating company, if you ever want to look it up. They are self-described as an odd company who employs odd people, owned by an odd man in an odd part of the world, or something to that effect. There's a sign that they've made. They're very proactive. But Campbellton really is, unlike few other distilleries, Campbellton is its own animal. But we'll get into that. This is the 10-year-old, as you can see on the bottle. I hope you like our new shot composition. We thought it might be a bit easier for you to read what's going on, but we'll see how that works. We're always looking to evolve here. So it's a really, really good craft whiskey. It doesn't go to blends. Everything goes into single malts, and so it's really, 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 really built for character, like very few other whiskies are. So this is their entry level. I think they occasionally produce an 8-year-old, and they do a lot of special releases that can go under. But 10-year-old really is sort of where it becomes the Springbank that people know and love. And boy, do some people love Springbank. It can be a lethally popular whiskey, especially once it starts getting old or scarce. But anyway, we'll get further down that.
Am I right that Springbank share a distillery with Hazelburn?
Well, they do make other makes. They produce Springbank and its sort of sister malts, which are Hazelburn and Long Row. But they all come out of the Springbank distillery. So they're all come out of the same stills. They just have a different recipe and a different manufacturer. It must be a hell of a time resetting the plant for the different whiskies that come out of it every single time. There really is few other places that do it quite like that. But anyway,
Hazelburn tends to be very soft, very sweet, very candy store flavoured.
Yes, whereas Springbank is the middle one, and Long Row is the heavily peated, and it's sort of, they cover all tastes really, but they're all really quite Springbank. So I'll show you the dram there. It's quite a good colour, and because it's just a 10-year-old, that real depth of colour indicates that there's quite a significant bit of sherry maturation gone in there, because good company that they are, there is no colouring or chill filtration, as the bottle tells us, so we can trust exactly what we see. And what we're seeing is a really rather promising deep rose gold there. So, good start.
Little peat on the nose.
The nose is... It would be cheating to simply say the nose is pure Campbellton, but it is pure Campbellton. I've described Springbank in the past as one of the very, very, very few distilleries which absolutely typifies its region. Campbellton taste of Springbank and Springbank taste of Campbellton. The few other distilleries in the region, there's now the Glengyle, which is a sister distillery to Springbank. They've built it themselves, they own it. That makes the still in development but looking increasingly good Kilkerran range, which I do recommend you look at. It's going extremely cheap at the moment because it's in sort of a beta period. And then there is the Glen Scotia, which is a very, very obscure distillery, which I actually have a bottle of their 12-year-old, which we will look at in the future. It's a very, very fascinating whiskey, but it doesn't quite have the individual force of character that Springbank does. But enough ado about that. Let's really get in here and see what we're looking at.
Getting grasses and seeds. Makes me think of sunflower seeds of, say, dry, summery grass. A lot of sweetness, though. Some fruit.
It's peatier. It's always peatier than I expect. I don't, in my mind, Springbank is never a truly, truly peated whiskey, but then you smell it, and peat is one of the first things that comes. It's a really dry, sticky, phenolic, medicinal peat, and there's tremendous brine, tremendous maritime characters, and those are really, really stacked quite up front, and only once you get through there do you get the sort of toffee caramel, lovely grainy gristiness, as Dave pointed out, and then quite a nice sweet maltiness. It's not an overtly fruity nose, it's quite mineral and quite grainy without there being too much of a sort of a Speyside or Highlands fruit or spice spectrum. But anyway,
I compare
let's
it, in
see.
my mind, Campbellton I associate with being similar to Lowland, but also heavy traces of the Highlands as well. Just the
It's a
sweet and
fairly
fruity character.
broad line. Fairly broad line between Lowland and Springbank. Lowland, of course, is extremely soft, very close to Irish whiskey, so there's quite a divide there. But as I say, Springbank is so much its own thing that it's almost incomparable to another region or another sort of group of distilleries. But anyway, let's see the palate. What was the strength on this one?
46.
46, so very good strength there. And it's prickly, but still perfectly drinkable at that 46. It's quite a fiery, quite a raw, elemental whiskey.
It's immediate, up front, a good hit of peat and a bit of that oceanic brine, a little bit of almost oily fishiness.
It's
just
really,
on the finish.
Really quite fiery. It really does warm you up. The spirit is quite keen, and that's really something that you will find with Springbank. When it's very young, the spirit is very, very expressive, and it's really quite harsh. Possibly due to their very, very strange distilling techniques, their 2.5 times distillation. They have some extremely strange practices with their stills, but when it's young like this, 10 years old, it's not a subtle whiskey at all. It really, really punches quite hard, and if you're not into it, then it can be very, very polarizing when people encounter these young Springbanks.
There is some fruitiness on that initial unwatered flavour, but it's more of a waxy, peely, rindy kind of a fruitiness, not the sweet.
Yeah.
Fruit.
With the water now, it does bring the wax out. There's a little citrus, sort of a lemon citrus, and there's just this echo of the strawberries that are going to come. The strawberries that would be here in another 8 years.
Sort of a fizzy or acid fruit, strawberries, for instance, pineapple.
Sort of
more tropical fruit
lolly
salad.
strawberries even. So yeah, the with water it has become a bit more of an interesting whiskey. It's broadened it out a wee bit as it's wont to do.
Oh, and it has come to life. It is exploding with a big fruity salad now.
There's much more of a fruit basket going on here.
The peat is still there, balancing it though.
It has brought the peat out even further as well. It's a drier, ashier peat now. Every time I try this, even though I'm not in any way unfamiliar with Springbank, I am so surprised by the level of peat that's in it. I think they may be creeping it up as time goes on, because I'm sure I don't remember Springbank being quite this peaty in the past. But of course, I
peat
haven't
has
had
taken on a
miles
kind
of
of a cigar smoke character, like a mild cigar ash smoke. But it's not overwhelming the fruit. It's not just it's also not just being relegated to the sidelines. There's enough peat and enough fruit that they're very balanced.
But I think we can quite confidently say better with water.
Yeah.
Unless you really do you like your whiskies quite prickly.
I would be kind of keen to try a cask strength Springbank someday, just to see what
They
happens.
do make a cask strength. I believe it's a 12-year-old actually,
Nice.
and that's extremely good value because you do get so much whiskey in there, and 2 more years on the 10, and I don't think it costs a great deal more than the 10, so it's a good buy if you see it out there. It sells out rather fast, but that happens. But anyway, the finish on it is quite, you'd call it medium. A lot of the more generous fruit characteristics move on quite quickly, and you're left with the more drier, more phenolic peat that hangs around, so it's not quite as satisfying as the initial flavour suggests, but it is long in its own right, so good finish on it.
There's still a strong alcoholic heat, but that fades quickly, and there's just a kind of a fruity wax, subdued finish.
So, scores-wise, I'm going to give this one a 77. I think it's good whiskey, but I think, as we are going to find out in the next episode, Springbank gets a lot better with a bit more age. What do you think?
Very close. I'm going for a 75 of this fella. Good, but I can see where there's room for improvement.
Good place to start, and it won't cost you a lot of money. It is a good introduction to Springbank, but I'm not the first person to say that. In fact, I think it was Charlie McLean who has the most famous one there. Springbank takes age, I think he says, superlatively, which is a very Charlie McLean word, if you know the man, and it needs it. To become a truly, truly beautiful whiskey, which it can, it does need that age. And we will see that in the next dram. Just a few more years, and it turns into so much more approachable, so much more generous, so much more nuanced dram. But we we will investigate that one very shortly in the next episode. So, that was Springbank 10 years old. Thank you very much for tuning in to one of the first episodes of 2016, assuming we're still organised. We've got lots of exciting stuff for you coming in the year, but in the meantime, keep safe and cilantro. See you next time.